Here we are with a new week of live coding, and we're starting off with something not very glamorous, but actually really pretty important anyway. And that is the "it works on my computer" problem as pertains to the Studio development tools. So Studio is an extensible application debugger, we'll call it today. It's a graphical tool for software diagnostics, testing, and inspecting. And I want to make the installation really easy. The installation should be super easy, so you just take any Linux box and you check it out, you run a script, and it just starts, and everything works perfectly. And I was kind of expecting it would be that way because I'm doing the deployment with Nix, and Nix has got very clever ways of dealing with dependencies and all of that kind of thing. But it hasn't worked out that way so far in practice. So we have an issue on GitHub that seems a little bit tricky. I don't really know what the story is there, so what I want to do is dig into that, see what the specific problem is there, see if we need to do something to fix the specific problem, and then also have a bit of a think about what we can do about the general problem, because it seems like now it's 2018, we've had VMs, we've had Vagrant, we've had Docker, we've had everything. We shouldn't be having this problem where it's difficult to replicate a piece of software from one machine to another. So we'll see whether the solution we have now is good enough to tweak from, or whether we should do something more drastic. And maybe we'll think about whether we can get some nice CI test coverage and all that kind of thing. We'll see what we have time for. And in case we lose our train of thought, I've noted the basic our basic stack there. So first step is to pull up GitHub, and we have this issue from Max. Studio attempts to load shared libraries from /user. So this is something I've already made an attempt to fix, but I'm not so confident that fix actually worked. So we're going to kind of take this from the beginning. So what the report is that when you first let's just fire up Studio ourselves as just a starting point. So now we have a kind of a checkout on the master branch. Any changes? We'll stash that. Okay, so now we have a clean master branch checkout. You should just check out the software and then run bin/studio and tell it to run as a VNC endpoint. That's all you're supposed to have to do. And we do that. And then Nix goes off. It's getting it's getting all of the dependencies that it needs. So it's building a Pharo Smalltalk VM. It's getting a rat poison window manager. It's getting an X server to talk to those and provide a VNC endpoint. All of that stuff. And then it runs that, and it says now the Studio desktop is running on this host as VNC display number 18. And then this is running on a Linux server now, and I hop over to my Mac kind of front end, and I run a VNC client to connect to display 18. And then if I drag the window some way that you can see it, we get the Studio UI. The Studio UI is pretty simple. What we have here is a text box where we can enter a Nix expression saying what we want to do. We could run, for example, some raptorjit code, raptorjit.run. So the point here is we write a script that says something that we want to inspect. This is the purpose of this script, is to produce some data that we can then inspect with our nice graphical inspector. So if we run that, we get a profiler report. We can click in there and we can see we can inspect the generated code and that kind of thing. So this is the idea. And the idea with Studio is you can do this for any application. I'm doing it for raptorjit, but in the future I would like to support 100 different applications, because it's a very common thing. You have an application that produces some messy data, logs, or funny formats, or whatever, and you just need to make sense of it with decent tools. And the idea of Studio is that you don't always want to be reduced to kind of shell pipelines and awk and grep for doing things like log file analysis. Sometimes you want something a little bit more high level, like what we have there. That's the idea, and this worked, and this installation worked fine. And I just want that to happen for everybody every time the people install it. So the problem we have is when Max did this, he didn't get it working. So for him, he pressed that play button to run an expression, and he got a Smalltalk error. And if we go down a little bit, we have this interesting. So the front-end environment was trying to load libcairo, which is a graphics library, from user libcairo, and that was failing to load libpixman. So I guess that this shared library was found, and it referenced another shared library that was not found, something like that. And the immediate problem here is that that path just looks wrong. So when we install with Nix, Nix installs all of the dependencies in a separate tree on the file system /nix/store. So every library that we reference should be in there. And this is not. So somehow what happened here is the GUI is finding a file that's not supposed to. And I already tracked that down. And where do I have that? To this problem in Pharo Smalltalk, where somebody's made a well-meaning thing. This is a fix that I already made. Someone well-intentionally needs to find the Cairo library. The first thing they do is look in some hard-coded paths, and then if that fails, then they consult the LD library path. So that's not what we want, because I've actually taken great pains in Studio to make sure that the LD library path is populated with exactly all of the libraries we should be able to see. So I guess we have two problems here. One is that these hard-coded paths are taking priority over the LD library path, which is kind of explicitly undoing the work that I've done to try and make it go. And the other problem actually is just having hard-coded paths at all. This is just not good. So I want my installer to provide all of the software dependencies, and if any dependency is missing, that should be an error. You should never just kind of do a bit of guesswork and maybe work depending on what software was already on the host, because the Studio software is supposed to be disjoint from the software on the host. It's not meant to have a dependency there. So I just patched this out. I just removed those lines of code. So this is just a diff that we're seeing in the Smalltalk environment to just take the LD library path. And I think that this is better. And to digress slightly, I wanted to send this upstream, but for me it's not really possible to deal with Pharo upstream. So Pharo upstream, from my perspective, they seem to only want to deal with people who are running on a very, very restricted set of platforms, like Windows, Mac, and a couple of Linux distributions like Ubuntu and Red Hat, because they're always distributing binaries, and they never really make source releases, and they never really kind of document how you would even build the VM. Everything is kind of, they optimize it to work on their computer, and then they hope your computer is very similar to their computer. And in order to make a contribution, you need to use special tooling, because Smalltalk has its own way of doing everything that involves source code. And in this case, the tooling is brand new. It only works in the bleeding edge version of Pharo, the new alpha release. So in order to submit a patch like this, you kind of need to be on a particular computing environment using the absolute bleeding edge of everything, and that's just hopeless for me, because I'm doing an application, so of course I don't want to be on the bleeding edge. I want to be on the stable release, of course, and yeah, and I want to be able to run on whatever platform I want. I don't think that the GUI library is the right thing to be dictating platform choices to me. So I've got slightly frustrated and unsubscribed from all the Pharo mailing lists, and we're just going to work downstream. So what I did with this is I just added to our build environment. I dumped this as a patch, and I just patched this in when we run. So if we read the log for how the Pharo image is built, oh no, okay, it's not on this branch. Well, anyway, that's the log for how the Pharo image is built. What we do is we take a basic Pharo Smalltalk image and we load in all of our own code here. And what I did then for this specific problem is to go over to this branch where when we're building the image, we also have a directory containing patches, Smalltalk patches, and we load all of those. So we get a reference Smalltalk image, then we load all our own packages, and then we apply some patches. And this switch is not very readable because the lines are terminated with carriage return rather than a new line. But anyway, this is the same diff that we were just looking at. This is a diff that will take away that userlib thing. Okay, so if we open up the one that we already have running here, this is the master branch. So let me just check that here. If we would search the image for /user. We do a search on this, say method source with /user. Okay, then when we're in the Cairo library, we do have this. So this is the code that we don't want. So now what we're running is off the master branch. So we have that because this patch hasn't landed on the master branch. So what we want to do is take them away from those, and then so that /user is referenced in a few other places. Although a lot of this is test cases and VM builds and that kind of stuff. So possible that there are other similar problems around. And actually this free type fonts, actually that looks very suspicious. I don't like this. I think we're going to fix this right now maybe. Or just a moment, just a moment. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. There is also some hard-codedness going on searching for fonts. It's going to look in the home directory for .fonts and user share fonts and all this kind of stuff. So this is also not good. I don't want to have code like this. So I want to kind of take this one step at a time. So I don't want to patch this out right now. So let's just make a note of this. I'll come back to that when the time suits. Okay. So in this image, we have that problem. So what I want to do now actually is just make sure that make sure that my patch for this problem actually worked. So we're going to shut this down actually. I'll quit that. And we will, yeah, so now we're on a Git branch that has this patching thing. So now when we build the image for the GUI, it should go through this patches directory, and in this patches directory, we should have this Cairo strict library path patch that gets loaded. So if I write now, again, the same thing, bin studio vnc, what I expect is that this always makes sure everything is up to date with respect to the current directory. So every time you run bin studio vnc, this should, if necessary, and caching everything where possible, but should always make sure that absolute up-to-date GUI image with respect to the current source directory is up and running. BNC display 19, because we didn't bother to close down the previous one. So now if we pull this up, let us just do the same code search and see if Cairo is looking at hard-coded places. Yeah, it is. That's unexpected and unfortunate. I did not expect to see this, and this follows on from something I posted this patch, and Max tried it, and it didn't help him. And it seems like the problem is I just didn't test it properly, because here are these changes which are supposed to be killed by the patch. So let's see why is that happening. What if we load the patch manually for a moment? If we pull up a file browser, and this is the studio directory tree. If we go into the back end where we build the front end and into the patches directory, then we have this Cairo strict library patch, which has the code that we want. Like if we just look at this code, it's not doing the hard-coded files, so this looks good. So if we would do file in, then that's loaded. And then if we do the same check again, do we have the problem now or not? Because now it's gone. Now the Cairo library is not there. Okay, and it's kind of interesting. So somehow the patch didn't take, and like if I would hop over to GitHub again, Max actually said when he tried the patch, find a reference to here. No, hold on, I go over to the pull request. He had a lot of follow-on problems that were confusing to me, where he had some follow-on problems where it didn't seem like things were building properly, and maybe we've just reproduced that. So he ended up kind of he's saying that it doesn't pick up the changes when he reruns Studio. So that's kind of interesting. So let's see if we both have the same problem then, it seems, right? So we also tried to run the GUI, and we also didn't get that change picked up. So it's still looking for the old stuff that we don't want. So let's try and figure out what happened. Interestingly, when we switched branches, it didn't build a new image, actually. It built... And it looks like it built kind of the script for running under X, but it didn't build a new image. That's a little bit funny. So is there something a bit messed up in the way... Something's wrong. Let's have a look. What about if we just explicitly try to build the image? If we would say... So that's how we build the Smalltalk image. What it's saying is that it already has that cache that's already been built. So what if we would say Nix store read log, something like that. So that claims, this is the log from that build, claims have already done the patch. Okay, so one of the reasons that it didn't do the build might be that just it had already previously built the right version and cached it. So it's actually, now I think about it, it's not really suspicious that Nix didn't rebuild the image, because I tested this branch on this machine before, so it's entirely plausible that it's cached. And when we look in that, it has done this, well, it's printed a message saying that it's done this patch. So let's have a look and see, maybe we just messed that up. Maybe this is where we load patch. So this is in a Nix file, but this is actually Smalltalk code that runs to build the image. We take a baseline Smalltalk image, we reload all of our packages out of the source tree to have the latest versions of everything. And then we also load the patches, and the way that we do that is we say the current patches relative to the source tree. As a file reference, get the entries, iterate over them. We print the patching message, which is what we saw, and then we say that entry as file reference file in, which I would expect to be fine. Let's just see if we would do that. If we do that directly in the Smalltalk image, what would happen? If we simulate what the script was doing, we have a path there, and then we say as file entry. Was it not? No. As file reference. Okay, so that's just evaluating that file reference. See all the contents that we want, so it was the right file, and then if we say file in, oops, select the right code. Okay, so if we say file in on that, then we don't get an error. But did anything happen? That I don't know. Okay, so let's go in and let's revert the change and then see if this fixes it again. Because we already manually applied this fix in this image. So let's go in, find the change, code changes. This is just showing us the changes that we've made today, and we're just going to go through, and this fix that we made, We're gonna revert. And now, if we would search for this string, we're expecting to find the Cairo library turning up again, because now it's supposed to be back in the bad state. Yes, okay. So now we're in a bad state. So if we would then find this again, so this is running the same code that the build will run. Did that work is the question now. I just ran that, so did it work? So if we once again do the same search, will we see Cairo, or did the patch work? The patch worked. Okay. So it kind of looks like the build is doing the right thing. So are we building correctly, but then running the wrong version or something like that? Let us take another look. You know, we actually had a pull request, which might be highly relevant to this. Let's take a look. Pull request saying that I'd done something, I goofed something. Yeah, fix Nix shell invocation. Yeah, so this confused me a little bit because it's a report saying that the script doesn't work, when for me it does work, although I must concede that for me it's not working properly. So maybe actually this is a fix that's needed already now. If we just look at this, it just changes the way we start the GUI. So conceivably I messed up my invocation and I'm not running the version that I think, which would explain a lot. So why don't we see, we have this from somebody who probably knows Nix a lot better than I do. Let's see if we have the same issue here. So if we would, we have a remote for that. Let's try this. Now we have yet another instance on display 20. We have plenty of RAM, so we don't care. So now we've just started everything up, and now we're on a branch that has the patches. And if we just review which branch we're on, we don't make a fool of ourselves. This is the change that I made that's supposed to apply patches during build, and that seems to have somehow not been effective. We'll see if merging this change to the invocation Nix shell helps. I guess we're experimenting a little bit. I don't know what the problem exactly with the Nix shell was. I'm taking it as an article of faith that it was broken before in some way, and now it should be working. What happens now? Do we see the Cairo library? No. Okay. That's pretty interesting. So I think that the way I had written that script, and we should look at that pull request, I think the way that I wrote that script was broken, and some clever, generous, kind soul has found my mistake and fixed it. And I'm still not sure why it was working on my computer, but it, obviously on my computer it was not working. Actually, it wasn't working on my computer. Something was working on my computer, but what was running was actually not the software corresponding with the source directory. So actually it wasn't working on my computer either. It wasn't working on anybody's computer. So this bin/nix script that we wrote on a live coding session last week was the fancy new way to start Studio that skips the installation step and runs it straight out of the source tree. That was apparently broken. So really what this means is that we broke the studio installation procedure last week, and now this would seem to fix it. That actually seems quite nice. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that we have all of these changes on our next branch. And we're going to ask if people can see if that helps. I really like it. I like the way you can just say, hey, I'm on this branch here now. I want to make sure I've got everything that happened on this branch over here, and there can be any level of indirection. So, on the one hand, I can manually merge each individual branch, or I can just say, just get me everything we had on that branch there, which was both our patching and also this other fix. And I think on the next branch, I think that we already had actually that Nix shell fix, and it's only the Pharo patching. But the nice thing here is that it doesn't matter. Git has all of that tracked. Git was fully aware of which commits not referenced on the next branch. So the next branch is the development branch, and I'm just going to push this now. And this is interesting. I would like to get CI test coverage for this in some nice way. Maybe we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back and think about how to get a test case that would detect this. So we'll define the problem briefly and see about doing a first step towards something automated that would catch at least some problems like this automatically. We will be right back. Hopping back. Let's actually first we'll communicate a little bit on GitHub just to make sure that people know what we just figured out now. And then what we want is to get CI test coverage, and actually thinking about that, probably what we need to do is cook up a test case. We don't really have a standard test case for Studio. We do have building the manual, and building the manual actually runs the GUI and steps through and makes it do work in order to generate screenshots, and that's actually quite good, but does that in a special build environment, uses a command called Nix build to do that, which is actually running in a chroot and all kinds of things. So it's not exposed to funny things that might be happening on the host system. And for the purpose of this test, we actually want to be exposed to those. So I think we'll make a self-test command as a first step in that direction. And that's something that we could then reuse for bisecting and all kinds of CI tests on different distros and all that kind of thing. But one step at a time. So let us hop over to GitHub and tell Max, please try the next branch. Oops, and here are some add missing dependencies. Okay, so actually we've got another fix in our in tray. So what we're going to do with this one as well, we're going to pull this, we're going to test this, and if it works for us, we're going to pull that onto the next branch, and then we're going to ask for some light testing of that. So add a remote for Max. VM depths. Here on the next branch, let's try a merge of that. Merge went well, and it stopped because I asked for no commit, and the reason I did that is just because it's convenient to understand what the change actually did to be able to read a diff here. Okay, so it added as many dependencies, fixman, font config, xlib, and put those presumably in the LD library path when the Pharo VM runs. It's a bit uncomfortable that we didn't have a test that would detect this being a problem, like they're actually missing library dependencies. So hopefully when we come into a test case now, it'll actually be such that it would pick up these kind of problems. But for now, we're gonna merge this because this looks good. And I usually reference the pull request number in my commit messages because GitHub does such a nice job of cross-referencing. So we will say that we merged pull request number 63, which was this branch, into next. With that, and we'll do a push again. And we'll leave a comment now. So everyone kind of working with Studio now is a little bit of a guinea pig, and this is very much appreciated, right? Because it's very important to find these problems and find good ways to solve them, and so so that when the next wave of people try it out, that it goes smoothly and everybody has a nice time. So this is very important work that we're doing now, actually. So let's do more of that. Let's try and make a new command called studio self-test, and it can be really simple to begin with. We'll whip this out onto a branch called self-test, and in the bin directory we have a script called bin studio, and at the moment you can say run studio GUI with a VNC endpoint or with an X11 endpoint, and what I want to do is add a command where you can say self-test. We really say test because it's short like the other ones. Okay, so if you say studio test, then what's it going to do? It'll say runs with the studio GUI software, and it'll run studio test. So we're going to have to write a script called studio test that does something, and fails if it doesn't seem to be working. This is going to be intended as a pretty simple kind of test, just to see if the installation kind of works. This will not be a full hardcore test suite. This will make sure that the VM builds, the image works, and it's able to do some basic work. So if we would have a completely broken Studio GUI, for example, then this should fail, and we could use that with git bisect to see, if we update dependencies, if we update libcairo, if we do all of these things, this would be a simple test to be able to find where breakages occurred. That's my theory anyway. I want this to fail, particularly if there are obvious software dependency problems. So where do we have our scripts? Studio X11 and Studio VNC. That is in the back end where we build the front end. We have a script Studio X11. So the script Studio X11 is generated by this Nix expression. It takes this text and it just does some substitutions. So when you run Studio X11, it copies the Smalltalk image out of kind of read-only immutable storage into the current directory. And this is pretty dodgy, actually. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that. That's not very nice. And we don't really want to be copying that into the current directory for multiple reasons. One is maybe you had a very important file called Pharo.image in the current directory already, and you're not very happy if it gets overwritten. Another could be another reason could be that when you run it multiple times, then they end up clobbering each other, and we've seen issues with that. So it might be hard not to fix that right now when we have it right in front of us in some simple way. I think we'll file an issue now so that we don't lose track of it. And we'll come back to it. Okay, we're going to fix that. But first we're going to do our self-test based on the way the things are right now. So we want to make a script that's like Studio X11 and like Studio VNC, which we'll take a look at just since we have the file open, but that does a test. Okay, so the Studio X11 script, that puts the Pharo image in a read-write location, which is important for making Pharo happy. It's not a very well chosen location in this case, but it wouldn't work if we ran it off the read-only storage. It would be lovely if we could make it work, but anyway. It sets there's an environment variable, the studio path, to be the source tree. This is a little bit tricky. This is telling the GUI that at runtime, when we enter a Nix expression interactively in the GUI and we ask it to build, the place that it should look for Nix code to load is in the source tree directly. So anyway, because Studio runs Nix at runtime, needs to be able to access all of this code, and that's where it gets kind of passed in. So it means that you'll always be running straight out of your source tree, which I think is a good thing. Anyway. And then it runs the Pharo VM with the Pharo image. And then we have the VNC variant of this, which is a kind of a wrapper. It runs VNC server, and it runs the VNC server will provide an X server to the Pharo VM and export that as VNC for us to connect to actually use. And the startup will be this rat poison script, which is a script generated here, which runs with the rat poison config, which sets the escape character to F1, something out of the way. And so actually when you're running Studio, if you press F1, you get an escape into a little window manager, and then it just runs the X11 thing. And the reason we have rat poison there at all is if you would like, with Tiger VNC, if you resize the window in the client, so if you drag and resize the window, that actually resizes the server, which is really nice in our case. But you need a window manager on the X side to react to that, and that's the one job really that rat poison is doing here. If the X desktop resizes, then the rat poison window manager will resize the Pharo window. Anyway, and the reason, normally I would run screaming from the idea of pulling in a dependency like a X window manager and all that kind of thing. The only reason I'm doing this with Studio is that we have Nix there. So if we upgrade rat poison and something breaks, then we're going to do a git bisect, and it's going to show us the precise commit a problem happens. So I've kind of, over time, I've developed trust in my ability to actually debug dependency hell kind of problems when they're managed by Nix. So I'm kind of happy to avail myself of the software that we can get like rat poison for these problems. And if we didn't have Nix, then we would be doing something much more complicated and more kind of first principles to avoid dependencies. Anyway, enough blah blah. Let's write a similar thing that does a test. So the test, I think what we're going to do to start with the test will be just to try and start the GUI and take a screenshot. So it's going to be similar. We'll use another program. I can't remember its name, but we'll find it. That's like a VNC server, in that it provides an X server to the Pharo VM, but instead of providing a VNC endpoint, it will just wait 5 seconds and take a screenshot. So let's write such a thing here. Script to do a simple test of the GUI. Studio test is write text file. This path is not kind of global on the file system. This is a local path for the package. And what will we do? We will start with a shell, which will be the exact bash that's available in our Nix build environment. And now there is a program that runs a graphical program and just takes a screenshot. So is that XVNC? No, it's not. It's nothing VNC, right? Headless X server. I remember finding it before. I think it's something actually that has since merged. XVFB has perhaps merged into X11 actually. Xorg with dummy devices might be what we want. If XVNC works, oh, sorry, not XVNC, what was it? Which one was it again? XVFE virtual frame buffer. And now that I think about it, I think I already made a similar self-test to this actually for the Pharo virtual machine. If you look in the packaging there, I already did something very similar. Maybe if we look in the main Nix packages repository. Okay. Is old. On. Just do it the same way. And this is a bit of a kind of a nasty situation. So I did a big packaging of the Pharo VM for Nix. I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound, why don't we do a really, really nice complete packaging of the Pharo, the whole Pharo environment with images and everything for Nixos, so that Nixos will have the most awesome awesome Pharo support ever. And it was a bit tricky because the Pharo universe kind of seems to be based on the idea that everyone will be running the absolute bleeding edge of everything, and the Nix universe is the same. So I kind of feel like neither upstream community is actually very compatible with what I want to do, which is to run everything off a stable release and then upstream from there. And this is basically a revision control workflow issue, right? So so I want to do something. I want to make a change on the stable branch, and I want to commit that. I want to send that as a pull request upstream, based on the stable branch, and that can of course still be merged into the bleeding edge ones, and may possibly require some porting and that kind of thing. But I don't think either community actually. I don't think that either the Nix community nor the Pharo community supports that workflow. I think that a prerequisite for making a contribution to either project is that you have it based on the latest bleeding edge, which for me would mean that then I need to port it, because that's not where I'm doing my development. So unfortunately, I did this and I made it quite complete and I sent it upstream, but I'm still listed as the maintainer, but I'm not maintaining it anymore because I need both Nix and Pharo to find a way to accept contributions off stable branches, because that's the only way to get application developers engaged in the projects and making contributions. I think anyway, it's the only way that I can justify spending my time contributing upstream. So anyway, having said that, let's cherry pick a test here if we have one. There's an install phase, repatch, figure. Where is the test? Sure, it was. Other file? Yeah. Did the test case somehow not go upstream? Maybe. Okay, anyway. So we will just accept it. So we will just do this ourselves. We will. It was XVFB, wasn't it? Find how to take a screenshot with XVFB. That's something more elaborate than what we're looking for. Pi virtual display, we're also really not interested. Okay, we'll read the man page instead. Everybody else is doing bindings. We don't want a binding, we're just trying to be lazy and run it. XVFB option. It does not have built-in screenshot support. Okay, then we do need to read the web. If anybody knows how, at the top of their heads, to take a headshot of a screenshot of a headless application, you can tell me. Otherwise, we might even almost want to run the VN version. Tell you what, let's just keep it a bit simpler. Let's just, instead of taking a screenshot to start with, let's just make it not crash, because what we want really is to take a baby step in the direction of testing here. Let's not get carried away with minutiae. So, we want to run the VM and basically make sure it doesn't crash. We might just okay, but crash. It's a bit tricky because if there is a dependency problem, it's entirely possible that we won't get a crash. What we'll actually get is Smalltalk debugger popping up. So I think we do actually need to take a screenshot in order to know where we are. So I guess our test case would fire up the VM, load the Pharo image, make it do something, slightly non-trivial, if it works, and then take a screenshot. And then I guess we would maybe even diff that screenshot to see if anything has changed. That could be our success fail criteria. So if the Smalltalk debugger would pop up, for example, that would obviously impact the screenshot. So yeah, so let's do the lazy web thing and see how to take a screenshot from XVFB. Or maybe we'll take a screenshot from an Xorg null display, because I think XVFB was subsumed into the X server directly. We're gonna just read the top links here. So first of all, if we have XIs, for example, people package XIs these days. I don't know. I just want to have some X program. I just want to see if we can make this work. Here we have XIs. So let's see if we can take a screenshot of XIs just to begin with. Acknowledgements. Oh, this is there. I guess we don't expect anything to get printed there, right? Because presumably XFB has defined an X server endpoint, probably in a Unix socket, and provided that to Xeyes, and then Xeyes has printed something there. What we would want to do the thought occurs that there's actually a slightly more direct way that we can do this, because Pharo can take a screenshot of itself. We might make our lives a little bit easier if we don't bother. I mean, we want to start the Pharo VM, and we want to make it do something slightly non-trivial to produce some image, on its own virtual screen, and then we want a screenshot of that. But since we're already going to be telling the Smalltalk VM to do something, maybe we ask it to do the screenshot as well, and that's also something we're already doing when we do screenshots for the manual. So let's stop going down this track into the depths of hell, or wherever it is that we're headed, with having to synchronize everything, with taking screenshots and everything through shell scripts and stuff. And let's instead say that our shell script is just going to fire up the VM, and then should we say the VM is going to decide for itself whether things are okay. We'll say that the VM is going to generate, it's going to do some work, and it's going to generate some files. For example, a screenshot. Maybe it'll generate a screenshot. Yeah, we'll make it generate a screenshot for now. I'm figuring this out as I go. That's live coding, right? We wanted to go back into where we build the front end, and we were starting to write the script. And now, what we really want to do is XVNC still might be the solution. So if we would tell XVNC to run sleep, would that, when the sleep command terminated, would the X server also terminate? It seems like it works. So it seems like XVFB will just run a program, and then when the program terminates, it will also terminate. So maybe what we'll do is we'll run the Pharo VM this way, just as a way to be able to run an X program without having a real X server, and we'll put a timeout on it as well. Remind me how timeout works. Duration command. So in this case, if we give it a short timeout, so this the supervision timeout is going to go. Then we get an error. It took too long. So maybe we'll do that. We'll say that we give it something generous, like a minute, shall we say? It'll be so generous. 30 seconds to run the VM, and the VM in those 30 seconds is expected to do something and generate a screenshot of that something. In this case, we expect, if the VM terminates in a reasonable time frame, like 10 seconds, then we don't get an error, and everything is fine. Good. Why not? Later. The big X or little X? What's a little X? And we're going to want to run just the... I think we don't want to run the Pharo X11 script unless we can also pass some extra arguments there. And can we? No. But maybe we should be able to. So this Pharo X11 script, why don't we do that so that if we pass any extra arguments to that, they go through to the Pharo VM, because we're going to want to ask it to run some Smalltalk code. And we can see here... Aha, okay, hang on, that's even better. That's even better, we can run it... Okay. I'm not being very logical. We want to run the Pharo VM and generate a screenshot. We already have code in this very file for when the manual is created for running the VM and generating a screenshot. So why don't we do it the same way? We just tell it to not use any X server at all. Okay, so I was being silly. Let's write this same way as the other screenshot. Could we even run that? Hold on. That would be a bit more radical, would it? In principle, we could kind of reuse this, right? The only thing is that the API here is really written for... There's two problems with reusing this. One is that the API is kind of designed for the way the manual goes. And the other problem is that this runs in the build environment. So this Studio Inspector screenshot Nix expression, this on the Nix level produces a screenshot, and that's not what we want down here actually. Here on the Nix level we want to produce a shell script that runs outside the Nix environment and produces a screenshot, and that's actually crucial because what we want to do is see if this actually works outside the carefully controlled build environment, to see if Studio really runs when we run on the host environment rather than in a Nix build environment. So I think we're honing in on the sweet spot where we want to do things similarly but not quite the same as that. So okay, let's do that. First we're gonna replicate this problem that we already filed an issue about, which is a bit of a bummer, but so it goes. Copy the Smalltalk image into the current directory, and I will just update our issue to make sure we fix that at the same time. There. Now we won't forget to fix the other scripts. Good. Back to business. So now we're going to run something like this with a timeout. Timeout. And we're going to run it with this script. So now we need to write a script. So let's do that. Smalltalk script is... We can do something pretty simple. For right now, why don't we just output a screenshot? Because that's ultimately what we want. So let's just do what they did here. PNG read write output form. We don't have any particular window. We want to do the whole desktop. So let's see how to do that. So a difference there is that for the manual, I'll just pull that up briefly. For the manual, we want to we're screenshotting particular windows. We're not kind of screenshotting the whole UI. We take individual windows, which is kind of might be fine in this case, but it's... I mean, no, because if the Smalltalk debugger pops up or something like that, we want to see that. So we actually want to take the whole desktop. So let's do a little search for how we view a screenshot. There is a menu item called screenshot. How does that work? If I click this, this can actually do that. No, we want to make a screenshot. Isn't as simple as calling make a screenshot. And paste up morph. I think that we have, unless I'm mistaken, of squeak. Is there a global variable called world? Yes. And is that a world morph, which I think is a kind of paste up morph? What was that screenshot function called again? Screenshot. Make a screenshot. Okay, so if we write world make a screenshot, what would happen? It would interactively ask for something. Is not what we want. Now let's see where that comes from. The entire world. Where is that string coming from? Here, make a okay. Let's look at what the make a screenshot function does. It does basically the same thing, but where does it get? World image form will be for the entire screen. So we need to get, within the Smalltalk GUI, we need to get the object that represents the kind of the bitmap for the entire screen. It looks to me like that's world image form. So let's do that. On file name. Why don't we call it that? And we'll print some messages to be nice, right? So transcript show taking screenshot. What do you reckon? Can this possibly work? If so, what we want is that we would write bin/studio test, and what we would get is a file called studiotest.png. Surely it's not going to work now, but we try it anyway. Wild optimists that we are. It checks if there's any dependencies that it needs. I'm not sure why. Do we reference some piece of, interesting, do we reference some piece of software that depends on different things? Anyway, so we're populating our Nix cache. So somehow, when we ran this, it Nix figures out the kind of the full set of software dependencies that we need, all the way down to libc and everything. And it's rebuilding the VM. So did I change something? Maybe I changed something in the file representing the VM or something? I'm not sure. Interesting. Let's think about whether this makes sense or not. Let's hop into another shell and just do a diff and see what we actually check. Sorry, wrong directory. This is working in here. No, I wouldn't think that would matter. So we changed the shell script to add the studio test command. We added a new build option to, or rather, when we build the GUI, we generate a script called studio test, which is the one that's going to be executed behind the scenes. And we also updated the Studio X11 script, put on some extra, that if you give it any arguments, that those are passed through. So I don't immediately see why that should have forced a kickoff of a build. And the build, okay, studio test command not found. So maybe we didn't link that in or something like that. We built a bunch of stuff, and I can't immediately explain why we did a lot of builds. So in principle, when you ask Nix to build something, in principle, it can go off and build stuff. It can download pre-built binaries from a cache and all of that kind of thing. But I can't account for why that happened right now, why it rebuilt the virtual machine, and I would like to understand that. It may well be an innocent explanation. What if we scroll up a little bit? How much rollback do we have in Tmux? Too little. Okay. That's suspicious. One step at a time, though. This is the actual error we're concerned about. And There may be an innocent explanation for why that ran. I don't know. I'd like to find out. But anyway, studio test command not found. Why not? It found Studio X11 before, so why does it not find Studio? Aha. So when we create a package of Studio, we're not including Studio test. We should do that. Otherwise it doesn't get included in the environment, so it won't. Okay, again. Studio test was still not found. Studio X11, was that found? Yes. The Studio X11, I mean, it didn't work because we don't have an X server, but it didn't have trouble finding anything. Whereas test didn't work. So let's have a look at how we define our environment there. Ah. So actually, we were just, when we do the test, we were just installing the if we just hop back. We were just installing this package, Studio GUI, which contains, which we've marked as deprecated. Okay, so why don't we make all those packages individually addressable? And when we go back to our script, we'll do this a little more directly. We're going to need to test that these all work. So we just for each variant of the command, the VNC, the X11, the test, we'll just install only that which is actually needed. I hope that those all work. Undefined variable, studio test. Do we need to do any more? Packaging, overlays. Okay, we need to declare everything there that's going to be accessible. So, you know, it gets a bit messy. We already have this this umbrella one, so we might be able to do it instead of exporting everything individually. It might actually be enough to do that kind of umbrella one. Let's see if we can update the script in that way. Anyway, then we would just write this. What do we reckon? Now we got a different error. Unexpected arguments, small talk script. Okay, that sounds like a more straightforward bug. When we run our same way up there, Pharo, no display, the image. No display because we don't have an X server. Image we want to run. Tell it we want to run Smalltalk code and to quit when it completes. And then we give it the Smalltalk script, which is going to be, is that, Smalltalk script should be a file. I think we made the Smalltalk script just a string. Yes. Okay. Instead of making this a string, we should write script video test of SD. So then what it's going to get is a file name rather than a great long string, which is probably going to be better. Still didn't work. Why? Going to do the same thing. No. And a string. Is it actually that it didn't like? It looks like it didn't like us having a. Didn't like us having. It didn't like this. Right. We're doing a write text file. It seems like it didn't like us having a random variable called that. Right. That surprises me. But let's see if we can just do it this way. Why don't we just splice it in line here? I'm actually a little suspicious, but let's just take the direct route for now. If this works, then we'll worry about whether it's stylistically reasonable. No, it didn't. Unexpected dollar curly. Not sure if you can do multi-line things there. I would have thought so. Hang on. Let's take this a step back. Let's do. Pardon me, knocking around. Fix the indentation again if that works. It doesn't. Didn't want unexpected colon, expecting semicolon at 158. Again, timeout was the same issue, so I was not conscious of this, but it seems like when you're doing a write text file derivation in Nix, you're not allowed to attach arbitrary kind of attributes to that derivation, which is something that I often do. So live and learn. This might have actually worked. This is actually a warning. I might even patch the VM at a convenient time to take that out. VM, it tries to do something fancy with thread priorities that requires some special permissions and stuff, and doesn't actually work on arbitrary machines. And I already made that warning message about that much quieter, but it still has that one printout. I'm going to take that out as well. An area of disagreement that I have with upstream. They want to print a very, very loud warning for something that I don't think is important. Did we get anything? No. We wanted to get a screenshot and we didn't. So what went wrong? Well, this variable would not have existed. It was all wrong. What we want to say there is studio test script. Taking a screenshot, took a screenshot. That looks more promising, right? Studio test.png. Let's copy that somewhere that we can see it. Another pop, so move it somewhere that is visible. Okay, that's a screenshot. That's fine insofar as it goes. So we have managed to, when we run studio test, it now builds all of the software and then it runs it not in the build environment but in the kind of the host environment. I'm not sure my streaming software is behaving at the moment. Let's see about that. Seems possibly working. Just that. And my Mac is not very happy. Pardon me, I'm just off screen killing a couple of processes. When the preview program opened, things kind of got sluggish on my machine where I'm doing the machine is responsible for streaming. Anyway, I'll keep half an eye on it. I need to restart it. Sorry, I need to restart this streaming application. I'll be back. Here we are, just continuing immediately from where we left off. The desktop computer had a problem. Anyway, we had just successfully run the command studio test, which produced this screenshot. So now, which is not a very exciting screenshot, it's just the opening screen. But anyway, now if you would write this, then it makes sure all of the studio software is built. And that's how it failed. Maybe it didn't want to overwrite something. File exists. Anyway, problem number 2. If you write studio test now, first it makes sure that all of the studio software is installed. So if you would do this out of a completely fresh checkout and you had never built anything, it would build everything, but it wouldn't install anything in your environment. It wouldn't touch your path, LE library path, user directory, anything like that. Everything would be built off to the side in the Nix store. Then when you say test, it actually, for now we manually remove that file. If we run studio test, then it runs studio not in the build environment, but in the kind of the runtime environment on your host, and it takes a screenshot to make sure that that works. So if there were any crucial problems, that would prevent the Pharo VM from opening the image, and from opening the initial Studio GUI and taking a screenshot. If any of that didn't work, then we would not have got this file Studio Test. So that is something. So what's the next step? We got a couple of different kind of like related paths, right? So one is to make this run on CI, for example. We could get Travis to run this just as a basic sanity check to make sure we get our dependencies installed. We could also try and make it a little bit fancier so that the screenshot is more interesting. For example, we might inspect an object or 5 objects or 10 objects and make a kind of a funky looking screenshot out of that. Even maybe a really big one, I don't know. There's a lot of things that we could do to try and make the test a little bit... I mean, it's still only a sanity test, but we would like to make sure that, for example, the dependency on the Cairo library is exercised, and that may actually involve forcing it to do some vector graphics or something like that. So, pixel graphics, I suppose. Anyway, for now, let's just push this and hook it into Travis CI as a first step. It's always nice to get kind of like a very, very first foothold with CI because there's not a lot of automatic testing going on in Studio yet. So let's clean up our diff and push it and get it running on Travis. That will be our plan. Let's be good and put this separate logical commit, not on its own pull request, but at least on its own commit. It was actually a bit unrelated. That's not needed. So actually, you know, we might take that one separately. Actually, we'll be very good. Pharo X11R based on Nix. Hop over to another branch, and we take this one very specific change here. Like that. Commit that to say Studio X11 pass command line arguments. If it runs Studio X11. Good. That will be a pull request. We'll do that right now. It's on next because that's where we did base it. And we get a reasonable time. We're going to need to check that those commands work. And anyway, now back to where we were, which was self-test branch. And that change that we just cherry-picked, we don't actually depend on here, so we don't need to pull that onto our branch. We'll just go back to where we were, which was adding the Studio Test command, and also actually changing the way these were referenced. So we'll just quickly make sure that that works. PNC still works. Does X11 still work if we run that in X? About 10 seconds or so to crash. No crash. Probably working fine. Okay, so this is good enough to push on a pull, put on a pull request and try and get some CI coverage for. And And now we want to run this on Travis. So I hooked up a Travis CI, but I haven't configured it. I just hooked it up. So when we do a pull request to the Studio repository, we get these ugly red marks, and I think that that's just saying that we've asked Travis to do testing, but we haven't defined the tests in any way. Okay, and it falls back on some kind of a default that doesn't work. Okay, so what? A Ruby test even. Okay. Let's define a Travis CI. And let's remind ourselves the YAML format that they use. And yeah, what we're going to do with Travis CI, it's going to take just some random like Ubuntu VM or something like that, and it's just going to grab our studio code. It's going to run it using Nix to install everything, which also I guess is interesting. It'll give us a sanity check on how long it takes on a random environment to install our various software, and that might see if any builds are needed, binary cache. Anyway, it's going to see to install Studio and run it and generate a screenshot on a normal Ubuntu machine. How long does it take and does it work? So it's going to be valid for finding basic dependency problems, and if things would take a long time, we should get some visibility on that here. So we need to write a travis.yaml file. I do this like once a year or something, so I know how it's swapped in. We look at what we did for Raptorjet maybe, although that builds with Nix. Yeah, C project, probably close enough for our purposes. Let's look at what we did do for Raptorjet. Let's look at one of our own examples. Okay, let's do something like this. In our studio directory, we also want to have a Travis YAML. Language Nix is fine. We want to have Nix available. Probably, we probably change this later to use Ubuntu, and we'll install Nix as part of the procedure. But for now, this is maybe okay. I don't know what that pseudo false is there about. Yeah, no, actually, I'm not happy about that. Let us use an Ubuntu. Travis.yml example shell script. I just want to write a shell script. I don't want to buy into the whole business. So let's live dangerously. We'll have an install. Will be install Nix, shall we say? Using a generic package.
Hey, Daddy.
A moment.
Daddy.
Yeah, buddy?
Hey, Daddy.
Yes, Fred?
Daddy's coming.
Okay, I'll help you with that. 1 second. Excuse me. to oblige. So where were we? We were thinking this is going to run on a generic Ubuntu, which we want. We'll install a completely random, probably obsolete version of Nix, which is also good. And we could also install it from the website, but we'll do it this way. And we want to then have our script will be, and we should update that. Now we'll run sudo test, and we will expect to get a screenshot out the other end. There's already a timeout built into Studio Test, if I recall correctly, so we don't need to put a timeout here. What do we think? Is this any chance that this will work? How do we tell it we want Ubuntu? Ravis CI choose base distribution. And we need sudo to do it. Okay. We would like to get Ubuntu trusty. Dist trusty sudo required. We'll do the sudo, I think, for the apt-get install. Sudo required. That looks faintly plausible at least, right? So let's make a new branch out of this. We'll make a pull request out of this and see what Travis thinks of it. I'm sure there is a better workflow, but if we only have a couple of problems, this should be good enough. We'll target that at next, so it will be a little bit less noisy, but this will still work. Build is in progress. What do we got? Booting. So this will be interesting in a couple of ways. I mean, so will the Travis YAML we wrote work? So will it generate the screenshot and correctly test that it exists? Will the installation work? Will it manage to install Nix? Will it manage to use Nix to install Studio? Will that take a long time? How long is it going to take? Is it going to take, 30 seconds or 5 minutes or an hour to install Studio? That's interesting to know if you just have a random Ubuntu trusty. But that could happen, for example, if because we're pinned to a particular version of the Nix packages. If that would get old and out of date, it might be that that the binary is not available in the kind of upstream Nix caches. And then it would be nice for CI to tell us that, hey, now it takes a really long time to build these old packages, and it might not be a bad time to update our packages now anyway, especially if we have test coverage and we can do a bisect. Anyway, what's happening now? It's running and doing something. I don't actually see it doing anything relevant to us. Oops. Okay, language Ruby, that's a bit of a worry. I guess that's some kind of a default. It's not Ruby, that's Shell. Maybe that's going to be a problem. Let's look into... Why did that fail? Was that... One step at a time. Don't like this Ruby business. Is shell a valid language bash? Okay, let's add that. fine. There, here. We have a new build running. See if this works a little bit better. So while that runs, we can think about what our kind of next step here. So it's a bit boring that the screenshot, if I pull that up, is just this. So it hasn't actually built anything. I guess it's nice that the screenshot is deterministic in the sense that then we could actually check at the jar hash or something of the screenshot to make sure that nothing is visually changed. So it would be nice if we did something. If we managed to kind of virtually click that green button, we might come back to that another time though. But it's worth capturing. So what are our kind of next steps? We want to make video test form a build and graphic. That would be a little more satisfying because the original bug report that we had did say that installation had a problem after clicking that green go button. So there's a bit of a risk that we missed the bad case there. Where were we? What's Travis up to? It's not happy with that either. Same error, sudo apt-get install failed. Okay. Ah. Oh well, Nix is not bundled for Ubuntu Trusty by the look of it. Okay, so let's see, how do you normally install Nix? Well, now one wonders if it is better to let Travis provide the Nix environment. I don't know. Look. But we'll try doing this, which would be to install the current release of Nix from the website as a binary. If you have any trouble with that, well, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to stick with Ubuntu for now. So we'll try this. I'm not sure whether the right thing to do actually is to reuse the Nix support that already exists in Travis, or whether that's taking us, I mean, that's maybe more likely to work, but maybe less likely to reproduce a problem that a real person would have on another distro, like Ubuntu or something like that. So we'll try this for now. If this works, we'll be happy, and if it doesn't, we might look for a shortcut. Because the main thing that would be nice now is actually just getting some kind of first step testing happening on every pull request, and then we can iteratively improve that, and each improvement will go on to CI and kind of keep us in a good state. Back we go. Here. That was build 11 that errored. It's build 12. It's kicked off now. No, it's still 11. What was it? This is the one we're interested in. We're waiting for that to start. While that happens, let's see about making our screenshot more interesting. What do we do when we... What did we do when we generated screenshots before? We had... Quite lively in the next room. We opened an inspector on an object. We define the object elsewhere. Hold on, I'm just swapping back in how we build the manual now. Doc, default, screenshots. That's interesting. When we build the manual, we actually we build separately. We build some Raptorjet data, which is something that's nice to inspect. So this is not done. This is done as a build step rather than as a kind of a runtime part of building the manual. And so it doesn't quite perfectly fit in with what we want to do now, which is we would want to do this via the user interface, whereas here it's happening behind the scenes directly on the back end. So we can't completely reuse that. Anyway, we've spent a little time. Let's hop back over and see if we have another error now from. Now we've got another error here. Did Nix? Okay, so Nix installed, but then we need to source a file. We're on the right track by the look of it. Hold on. Where was that thing that we need to source? Like this. We need to copy that. Did we get it? I don't know. This web GUI is a bit confusing. Where's that Travis YAML file? What about if we try that? Okay, we'll trust that Travis will fire that and have a think about it, and meanwhile we can go back to what we were trying to do. The basic problem we have now is that our screenshot is boring. And we already have a bit of Smalltalk code, so in principle we could say, you know, transcript show sizing the studio UI. And here we could just write a little bit of Smalltalk code that would just make something happen on the screen that then we're going to be able to see in our screenshot that might be interesting. So I wonder what would be a good idea there. I might just, because we had an error with some of the graphics stuff, I'm kind of tempted to just do something simple and graphical. Or what should we do? And let's build something. Should we build something with Nix? Probably is good. It gives us a bit of coverage, doesn't it? Let's make the UI do some real work. Okay, so here we are in the UI. We have a class called Nix. It has some methods like Nix build. So if we write Nix build, and I guess that wants an expression, does it? We'd say with import studio run for I is 128 do end. Let's see what happens if we run that. So now this will be asking the GUI to make a request out to the backend to build something with Nix. And okay, that would successfully build. So now, if we look at how how our inspector does things, when we press the Go button, it does do this Nix build. Does it in a slightly different way. Okay, we could just call this Go method, could we? That is an instance method. So we'll do something a little bit funny. So Smalltalk is an interesting environment, right? So we have when it starts up, somewhere in our build script for the image, we tell it that when we start the image, we want to automatically start this full screen window here. So now this is an inspection of an object of type Studio Inspector. And I would like to send a command to the Studio Inspector object now, but the question is, I mean, it's not a global variable, so how do we actually get a hold of that object, because we want to call the Go method on it? And there's a very direct way to do it in Smalltalk. We can say, if we want to create a new one, we'd say Studio Inspector new, but if we just want to get a list of all of the existing instances, then we get an array with one item. So Studio Inspector all instances, and then when we say first, for example, that gets us, in principle, it gets us just a kind of an arbitrary instance of the Studio Inspector object, but when we start Studio, there is only going to be one of those. So that is actually not a completely unreasonable way to get a reference to the Inspector object. So then once we have it, we can say Go and give it that other code that we have. I'll just write that again because it wasn't very complex. Run for I is 1 to 1e8 to end. Sorry, some error there, missing a close quote. Sorry, with import. So that's something. The trouble with this is that the profiler data, the samples, I mean, if we would actually run this, it's not guaranteed there will be exactly 41 samples. That's also not quite ideal. So why? So what about? Really, all we want to see is the trace stop. What about if we just be really like mean and nasty and dirty again? So we do that, and then as a side effect, we're going to get an object of type argit trace. Is it? We have no instances of that. Have an argit stop event. No. I mean, I'm just being a little hack and slash here. Argit trace stop event. We did have such an event. What I want to do is just get a hold of the IR code for the trace, and I'm being kind of sneaky about it. I mean, it's this line. This line finds us this window that's going to be there maximized when Studio GUI starts. This tells it to build something. And that's actually, not sure if it's going to have a graphical effect or not. In this case, we're just thinking that if we do that, then somewhere in the image, we're going to get this. No, so it's not going to happen graphically. Get the trace stop events. Let's take another tack here. Argit audit log all instances. There is an audit log. And can we reference a trace here? Self traces. There is a trace. And there we get an IR listing and an IR tree. I would kind of like to get that displayed on the screen. I would find that reasonably satisfying. So let's go back to Travis for a moment. That's what we were doing, right? Did the installation work? Interesting. We got a slightly more satisfying error here, actually. When we ran the studio script, it failed on line 14. So is this like a shell portability issue or something like that? Pardon me hopping back and forth. There's a little bit of latency on the Travis thing, so of course I want to, when it's ready, I want to come and let it run forward a bit. 14, did I say? This line. Did not work. So is it actually this, this was not so popular with, I use EQ or something. No, it shouldn't be equals equals, it should be equals. Is that right? String 1 equals string 2, yes. Interesting. So this script we run using the shell from the host system. So if I'm using bash and you're using ash or tc shell or z shell or something, then this, no, it's not true. This will start, but it'll run from the bin shell. So it's, well, I guess it is similar. Who knows what is running for bin shell on a given machine. So it looks like I maybe used a bash specific feature or something not like POSIX shell with this double equals, and that wasn't very popular. So maybe actually, maybe Travis just caught its first bug, which was a shell portability problem. And this is the kind of problem that we generally don't expect to have with Studio because we have Nix managing all the dependencies, but this is the special case when it's the script that actually starts Studio in the first place. That's before we enter our little kind of Nix environment. So it's actually really important to get this right and make this portable. So okay, Travis can keep chugging on that. We'll go back to trying to cook up our little Smalltalk screenshot. Okay, so I want to get that on the screen. I want to actually run Raptorjit, building that example, and I want to get this on the screen. And I'm expecting this to be deterministic because nothing on the screen here involves the profiler. So actually getting that code should be pretty consistent. That's unlikely to be different. And it will be interesting to see if it's deterministic, like all of these little lines and everything. I would imagine that it would be. Probably we could even do like a SHA hash of this image to see if anything had changed, like a debugger window had popped up. Otherwise, actually, there are some cool image diffing programs around as well I'm aware of. But anyway, let's take this one step at a time. let's look at how we did this on the other screenshots. When we build the manual, then we are running through and driving these inspectors. So we already found an inspector. So in this case, it was creating an inspector and giving it a size. In our case, we just found an existing one. But it had already... We probably want to do something more like this, where we calculate an object from scratch, and then we inspect it, and then we pick the view from the inspector that we want. So it requires a bit of thought, because I don't really want to kind of copy and paste this, although I guess in the short term, to get test coverage kind of covers the go button would be rather nice. I want to take a slight... I don't want to copy and paste this. I want to see if I can struggle my way through with a more direct approach. So I want to specifically generate that IR listing view. I want to specifically generate that. So where does that come from? IR tree. We have a function called IR tree view. What happens if we just kind of call that? So here we have... We run our build. Then we know that we've got an audit log, and we can probably we get the audit log, and then we take the first trace. And then what about if we say IR tree view on that? Then we get the IR tree view. Okay, so and should we do an inspector on that? Should we say something like this to open an inspector as a side effect? It seems to work. Okay, so this is extremely cheeky, right? And it's a bit hack and slash, but it's short, and we're still I guess learning the best way to programmatically exercise the GUI. So I'm gonna consider this to be a legitimate learning expense rather than a terrible hack, you know, because I just don't understand the problem quite well enough yet to know what is the right solution, and I'm not willing to copy and paste the longer code out above. So let's paste this tiny bit in here. Where caps the spaces, sure. So let us... Don't need to do it here, that inspector, I don't think, actually. So it doesn't hurt. Okay. Let's make it simpler. Let's say studio inspector new go. I don't think there's actually any use in reusing the existing one, because this is going to open on a new window anyway. Or could we? I think this will do. We create a studio inspector object, we tell it to do a build, which will run RaptorJIT, which is exercising the back end, because this is actually going to happen. You know, it's going to actually do this via the GUI. The GUI is going to tell Nix on the back end to build that, and then we will show that, and we should have something interesting on our screen, and let's see if this works. And now let us hop back over to Travis. Continue multitasking. That's the old error. This one failed as well. No? Yes. What was the error now? Still didn't manage to install Nix. correctly. Wonder if... So we did do that here, right? So we sourced it in that shell. Although we don't necessarily know, is that the exact same shell that was used there? Alright, I'll try another small thing to appease Travis. Maybe we'll source that down here. Background channel, yes. It's not very glamorous, right? This is just kind of slogging through some boring stuff that will be very, very beneficial to have. Anyway, that's given Travis something to think about. Hop over again and try to get that screenshot reproduced when we run bin studio test. Got some kind of an error at the Smalltalk level. Got an error. Wondering if that is relevant. So you got a trace object. It tried to generate this view, and then it tried to separate out the head and the loop with the IR instructions, and it got this error where it did a detect if none on the wrong kind of object. Okay, so let's have a look at that. The loop method. IR instructions. IR instructions was a block, which is a closure. Why would that be? How do we assign IR instruction? Okay. I wonder why we got that. So IR instructions is actually a block. So this was, I think, something. This is just to defer some evaluation. This was like a laziness kind of an optimization where we ask, where when we load up all of the audit log, we don't decode all of the instructions immediately. We wait until they're actually needed. Okay, so we're not supposed to access the IR instructions variable directly. We're supposed to call self IR instructions, which will check if they need to be calculated. Interesting. So we found an actual bug in the GUI, which maybe wasn't executed otherwise. But anyway, so here we're not going to write IR instructions. We're going to write self IR instructions. Chook. And now we want to save that change, which we do like this. I'm not happy with my workflow for exporting updates out of the Smalltalk environment. It works, it's just a little cumbersome. So we need to open a Monticello browser there. And we have our RaptorJIT package is modified. So we want to add a repository, a file system. front-end directory. And we want to see what the changes are. It's this. Assuming for now that will work, so we want to save this in that repository. We don't need a log message there because we're doing a logging with a git. And now if we run, it should rebuild the Smalltalk image because it should detect that the code has changed. That fails. Why? That didn't rebuild the Smalltalk image, so that's suspicious, is it not? We changed, did we not change? Yes, we changed all the code. We ran bin studio script. Is this because we're missing some important commits? No, we have the fix. Okay, so this is something wrong. Jesus Christ. How many problems can you have in such a kind of ridiculously trivial situation? So we ran bin studio test, and it didn't rebuild the Pharo image, which it's supposed to. No, now it now it did. You got an error, or did I just miss that? Hang on, let's scroll up and see if I did just miss that. No, it didn't do it before. Okay, but now it did. Where are we? Here's where we are. This is the command that we just ran. This time, correctly detected that the Smalltalk image needs to be rebuilt. It went in to load the latest versions of all the packages. We got some errors which kind of were like warnings that might actually represent a problem, but it's not the fish that we're frying right now. Then what happened? Looks like we had basically the same problem. So okay, so what we need to do is find. I think that I incompletely implemented a fix. If we look in the rgit trace, at some point I decided it was a good idea that the IR instructions would be decoded lazily. You have this function to access the IR instructions. You call IR instructions. It says, is that instance variable assigned to a block closure? If yes, then run it and replace it with a result. Otherwise, just return it. But there are presumably places where the raw variable is being referenced. So let's see how you do this in Smalltalk. We want to see places where that instance variable is referenced. A code search references to it. Yeah, that's what we want. Okay, so this one is okay. That's where we're assigning it, and it's going to be the same with IR constants as well. That's where we're assigning it to the closure in the beginning. That's not okay. That's supposed to be self IR instructions. That's okay. That's where we're doing the laziness thing. Oops. This is a problem we're getting now because it's the bug that I probably should have fixed earlier but didn't, where we overwrite the Smalltalk image when we start a new version of the UI. That's got to be fixed because that creates this problem that it's where it's looking for source code. It's looking for source code. It gets confused because it's trying to refer to a file on disk, and that file has been replaced. And that's a bug in Studio, which is going to be our next highest priority to fix, I think. For now, let's just restart. Let's just do that again. The new GUI, and I'm going to make sure that we have that. Bugs, Pharo, copies. A little bit of extra visibility because I want to fix that today. And meanwhile, back to where we were. We will run. We'll run the latest version. Display 22. Make our change here. And do basically what we already did. By creating work for myself now by deferring that fix. Beat myself up about that anymore right now. So we want to see references to my instruction. That one is fine. Needs to be a method call. That one is fine. Be a method call. We can do the same thing for IR constants now, because it is also initialized in a lazy way. Alright, did not have the same issue. Fine. Okay, so let's save this out now. Doing the same thing that we did before, which we noted is cumbersome. Can't optimize everything at the same time. There we go. And now let's try running that. So shut this down because this one's not going to work properly anyway afterwards. Now we want to see the image built again. Yes, it does get built. That's good. That's the error that we get when the file already exists. That's another thing that we need to fix. That now. We got the screenshot. We copy that screenshot over. Then what does it look like? Aha! Cool. That is our new. That's our new screenshot. Cool. So now we start the GUI. When we run Studio Test, we start the GUI, and in the environment for the runtime environment, not the build environment, the runtime environment, we start the GUI. We do build a Nix expression to actually run RaptorJIT. So RaptorJIT will get built and all of that kind of thing, and it will install any software that we need off in the Nix store. We'll generate an audit log, it will decode it in here, it will render it like that, which should be exercising any graphical dependencies that we have in the VM. So if there were like library path issues, then we should hit them at this point. So I'm actually reasonably happy about that. I think if this runs to the point that it actually generates the screenshot, then it seems to me we probably have our basic dependencies under control. Okay, so on that note, let's go back to Travis and see what it's unhappy about this time, if anything. Has that build completed? Failed again. Why this time? I don't immediately understand what the problem is here. So Travis managed to install Nix from the website just fine, which is good. Same thing that we ask people to do in our README. Then we try to source that. Why can't Bin Studio find the Nix build? I would have thought that we source it there, which is presumably importing it in our path. Could then be visible in there. The error we get is saying command not down Nix build, and something is telling us to go and install the Nix package manager. Oh, hang on. Am I outsmarting myself? Is it our script probably printing this message? Maybe it's something similar to the problem. Maybe it's another shell issue. We already have one shell portability issue. Will be, I don't know if interesting is the word, but it's plausible that it would be another one. So where's our studio script? So it's probably this failing actually, and probably for some surprising reason in that shell. And it doesn't help especially that we redirect all the output to dev null. Some very conservative shell that we could use. I wonder what shell they're using actually. Does it say what shell Travis is using? Is this not bash but something else? No, it's bash 4.3. What do we have here? 4.3. It's not guaranteed that the bin shell is that anyway. Okay, so this line is not right. Why not? Is it the bang that it doesn't like? It might not even, what if we would do this, because it may be we actually want to use some bashisms, and it may even be that the shell that's running the script supports all of the bashisms, but is deliberately suppressing them because it's trying to be, like a compliant POSIX shell or something like that. Personally, I normally write bash scripts. I don't normally write shell script, like generic POSIX shell scripts. I haven't done that in like a very long time. So maybe if we tell it we want bash, maybe our life will be a little bit better. Let's try that. And for now, at least, let's not suppress that error. So if there is an error, let's see what it is. Are we still on the right branch? Yes. Quoting. Oh no, so it was. The wrong commit message. Okay. Now, where are we? We got to check in. This is maybe a good branch to do it on. We also want to check in our update to the screenshot. We need to do a couple of things there. We need to make sure that we don't get an error if the screenshot file name already exists. And the other thing is that we just need to check it in otherwise. So we want to delete the screenshot file if it already exists. The easiest way to do that is probably in the Smalltalk code that has the path right there. Here's where we take the screenshot. First, let's see if there's any forcing predefined argument available. Put form on file named. Trash that, get rid of so anyone. PNG read writer. Can it just have an overwrite option, or do we need to separately? Or do we separately delete the file? Original. Close. PNG read writer. What am I missing? That must be inherited, sorry. Where is my brain? Image read writer. Put form on file. Okay, so it seems like that's just going to get an error if the file already exists. Delete a file of that name. We do that on file reference. File reference delete, yes, okay, fine. Before we do that, we will say something like that. Now it seems happier to take a screenshot even if we already had a screenshot. Make sure the screenshot still looks the same. Yeah, okay, that's good. So that part should be working. Let's have a look at Travis again, see what it's going to complain at us about now, because it never seems happy. Tyrant is Travis. Still running. May not be a good sign. Ah, okay. Well, this is actually quite interesting. So now it's actually installing Studio from scratch, which includes the entire Nix universe. So actually, if we've gotten carried away with our dependencies in any way, then this will be a place that we will see it, right? Like when I'm interactively testing, I don't notice things if I'm using a lot of dependencies because everything's already cached locally on my machine. Everything goes very quickly. Now, this is all of the software that Nix has to install to run Studio, and generally speaking, I'm kind of okay with having a lot of dependencies. Because my expectation is that you basically have like a server-like machine for running Studio. This is my thinking. You've got plenty of disk space. You have a decent internet connection, and you don't mind taking a little bit of a hit on the first installation. But everything is continuum. So I guess also it's building the Pharo VM because that's something that we have packaged downstream in Studio that's not in the upstream Nix, so it didn't manage to get a binary. And Travis specifically has got some presumably weak, underpowered, over-provisioned VM for doing that. So it's interesting. So it's going to be very interesting to see how long the Travis build takes to run, and think about whether we want to speed that up, specifically in the Travis environment, whether we want to speed it up in general, like to make sure that you can always get a binary cached of every package, you never have to run a compilation, and also think about whether our dependencies have gotten out of hand in any way. It would be interesting to check the closure size to see the total software footprint if we've carelessly imported anything huge or anything. Anyway, I'm going to leave that for now because that seems to be going in the right direction. And let's check in the other stuff that we did in that case, and then we might be ready for launch. We'll have Emacs help us find all the stuff we need to check in. So we updated some Smalltalk code. we exported that out of the Smalltalk image and onto the file system, and we're going to check it into Git via Emacs here. I know that in the Smalltalk universe they have very clever new ways for talking directly to Git and everything, but that's beyond my current level of sophistication and willingness. And okay, and then we also updated this test code to delete the old screenshot if it's there, and to make this, and to pimp the screenshot a bit to make it a little bit more interesting and exercising graphics and stuff. Fine, this will be going as 2 commits. We'll put the other one on another branch. Will we? I don't think we'll be that. Oh, yes, we will. First, this one goes on. We'll push that. Give Travis something more to think about when it's done with our first one. And we don't want to burn Travis CI resources unnecessarily either, so we're going to come back to this whole seeing how long it takes to test and what the resource footprint is. But one step at a time, we're going to be good and make a new topic branch for that Pharo code update. Base it off next. Usage trace, lazy code. So this is the way that I often do things. I split everything up onto a lot of topic branches. I pull request them all so that there's kind of individual visibility of all the things that are happening, and then I pull them onto kind of integration branches, like the next branch, for example, to make sure they all work together and have the overall desired effect in practice. And then when that's in a good state, then you can push it to master, which is a release. So we will actually merge that immediately onto that other branch we were just working on. Self-test Travis. What did we just call that? Easy trace lazy code. We'll push this. So this branch we're on now, the self-test Travis, is kind of working as a bit of an integration branch where we are pulling stuff that is relevant to testing stuff on Travis, even if it originates on its own topic branches. So when this one lands, when we're happy with this and we land it, it'll kind of bring all of the stuff with it that we've been working on this morning, and the next branch will kind of have everything up to date. Let's have another look at Travis. That was not the branch we're interested in now. We're seeing this one, so it's still running. There's the first one that we kicked off. Still running. So maybe this is indicative of what it's like for new users to Studio. The first time you make an installation, it does have to go off and download a lot of stuff, and how long it takes will depend on the speed of your internet connection, and in the case it needs to build anything like the Smalltalk VM, it doesn't actually take that long. But if it needs to build anything, it will also depend on your CPU. So it's something that we're going to need to think about in the Studio project, is how, what are our really kind of like baseline requirements and expectations. To begin with, I've kind of had the expectation that you would run it on a server-like machine, something with plenty of disk, plenty of CPU, plenty of internet connection, and then you would connect to that, with VNC or something like that. And of course, you can also run it on your laptop, but you'll just need to, if you're running it on a laptop on a really dreadful internet connection or something, you would need to wait a while for it to get installed because it's not kind of optimized for that use case. And maybe this will piss people off, and maybe we won't get away with that, and maybe we'll really need to optimize the installation time for first usage, and just get people on board and that kind of thing. Everything is possible. So the reason it's taking a long time now is it's building the Smalltalk VM, and that takes a long time because Travis is not a very beefy thing, but maybe that's similar to the kind of performance you would get on laptops. So it would be very interesting to go in and make this download from a cache instead, and that's a bit of a bigger issue that I've thought about a little bit. Anyway, I might just recap where we're at now and then go for lunch. So we have Travis apparently managing to build. Well, hold on. What have we done? We added a command called studio test that runs Studio in a representative way, not in its kind of build environment, but in the kind of runtime environment, the same way that it runs when you run it as a user. And it does some actual work. It runs a Raptorjit build and pulls in some data and inspects it and gets a visualization up on the screen, and then it takes a screenshot of that. We have that working very well. And we also have Travis CI integration now that will try to install Nix on Ubuntu, on a pretty old Ubuntu, and to then install Studio from scratch using that Nix, and then it's going to try and generate that screenshot and make sure that succeeds. And that would be a pretty reasonable first test. In that case, if there were any major compatibility issues with Ubuntu, or if there were any major missing software dependencies, we would expect those to be picked up. So it's not very elaborate, but it should be a kind of a good first step to having some kind of proper CI for detecting those kind of problems. We also found that some of the PRs that were already on the Studio repo were important things. So I'll need to go and hoover those up as well. Anyway, I think we're done for now. Question will be whether this Travis build succeeds. Hopefully it does. If it doesn't, it will probably be for an interesting reason. It will probably be because we had some wrong dependency or something. So that will be also valuable too. So thanks very much for playing along with all of this live coding, and yeah, see you later.